Welcome to Roots of Representation, a podcast series brought to you by Knology, a leading organization creating practical social science for a better world. The podcast series is a part of our larger National Science Foundation-funded project called Black Rep for Kids, where we delve into the power of storytelling in helping young Black children prepare for and tackle the challenges of climate change. If you're interested in learning about how we can build a brighter climate future for Black children, their families, and their communities, you've come to the right place. Let's get started with Roots of Representation, the podcast centering Black climate story worlds for young minds. Welcome. I'm Ed Green, your host for today's episode of Roots of Representation, and I'm thrilled to take this journey with you as we collectively discover ways to increase and improve the representation of Black voices, characters, solutions builders, and stories in children's climate change media. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Tresha Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs is a mom, a mental health expert, clinical director of a children's mental health facility in New York, and clinical professor in child and adolescent psychiatry in New York City. In addition to working with children, adolescents, adults, and families, Dr. Gibbs has published on a variety of topics related to the mental health of Black Americans, including how psychiatrists can talk to patients and families about race. Dr. Gibbs, welcome to Roots of Representation.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you here and to get a chance to talk with you. And so we thought, as we've invited you here to share your insights, we're going to work on looking at this notion of the challenges that Black children and families are confronting, along with some of the ideas for promoting resilience and emotional well-being within the Black community. We're also interested in discussing the needs for climate risk preparedness and how STEM stories, science, technology, engineering, mathematics stories, can help children understand their connection to the nature around them and give them a sense of control over their environment in developmentally appropriate ways. So, to start things off, could you tell us a little bit about your work and how it intersects with some of these topics?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. So I'm a child psychiatrist, as you mentioned. I have experience working with children, teens, young adults, and through some history research studying the mental health conditions in Blacks and minoritized communities. I also have written about social determinants of mental health in children and youth. And I think climate-related health impacts and climate change, it is a social environmental determinant of mental health. And so that's some of the background that I have. And I think that, in the field, we see that the impact of climate change has led to increased anxiety, stress in a very practical sense, stress, and for some people, PTSD, sort of more on the disordered level, like where the symptoms can be so impairing that, they affect your daily functioning. So at the same time, we know that in the field, there's also a lot of evidence of communities rallying together to organize and to display what we could consider resilience, adaptation and some collective action. And so hopefully we can talk a little bit about all of that today.
That's really important. And when you mention the social determinants of well-being, I think that's really an important place to start out. What have been some of the most common challenges you've seen in terms of Black children and families when they're confronting, climate or other kinds of issues that impact them? What are some of those ways in which you've seen these challenges play out?
One thing that we know is that many Black and minoritized communities live in areas where they are at higher risk for the impact of climate change, and sort of in the form of extreme weather, certainly extreme heat, flooding, and then at times can be more vulnerable to the economic and other impacts of disasters related to climate change, and thereby leading to some mental health impact. So I think that the challenge for Black families at this point include some of that, which the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has documented that Black and minoritized communities are just at greater risk as the global temperatures sort of increase. But I think that, if you are in a vulnerable situation as a Black family and or Black community, whether through, high rates of urbanization or even poverty, that you also may struggle more with other stressors, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges right now is education. And increased awareness, so that we can prepare and do what our community does well, which is really come together and engage in community organization, resilient adaptation to stress and to crisis. I do think that climate change as a topic is sort of getting lost sometimes in the noise of everything that's going on. And I think that education would go a long way for our community.
I'm glad that you raised it in that particular piece of the conversation at this point, because when we think about the things that Black kids need to know about climate change, it's more associated with things that they just need to know about maybe the world around them, and things that are developmentally able to sort of have access to, in terms of whether it's understanding nature or what have you. So what do you think some of the important things are that Black kids need to know in order to help their own growth and development, and to deal with some of the other issues that deal with their social and emotional learning?
Definitely. I think in the early childhood and elementary stages of life, it's important to establish some basic fundamental messages, such as, you are part of the natural environment, the environment is changing, and your actions impact the natural world. I think these messages need to be repeated in every facet of a child's life, as they are sort of foundational. So in development, you think of you're building on foundations that are pre-laid at various stages of development. And you can, as we mature, children want mastery, right, at each stage of development. When they have mastery, it decreases anxiety and uncertainty. It builds their resilience and their creativity. So by providing some foundational messages in the early childhood and elementary stages of life, it can allow for the more challenging solutions-oriented discussions to happen or be entertained as children go into adolescence and young adulthood.
That's really very, very helpful. And this whole notion of promoting climate resilience and emotional well-being, I don't know to what extent that can be discussed further, but what are some ways that, or strategies that can be effective in helping to promote this approach to resilience and emotional well-being with Black kids and families as we address some of these more stressful issues?
So, the American Psychiatric Association has a resource document on the social determinants of mental health in children and youth, which I helped to co-author. And I think one of the ways that we organized the information was to separate them into categories. So to sort of arrive at a hopefully very resilient child, family, or community, you want to ensure basic needs are met and that children feel safe and supported, even in the context of potentially stressful life situations, right? So basic safety, basic needs, right? Hunger, housing, and sending messages of, you are safe. We can take care of you. You can trust our society and your adults, your caring adults to take care of you. The other piece is the caregiver mental health, and really recognizing that to get to the child, we want to make sure that we are supporting their parents, supporting their families, so that they can be in the optimal position to care for and provide that stability. And then the other piece is related to sort of their adverse childhood experiences or life experiences. We want to push in the positive life experiences and buffer against the more challenging, difficult life experiences that may come up. Okay, whether it's, displacement because of flooding, or not being able to go to school because of extreme heat, or not, frankly, being able to play outside because of extreme heat, or having medical or mental health conditions related to the climate change health impacts. So promoting the child's positive development involves, I think, really helping them feel like actors in the world, that they're important, their voice is important, and then they can use their strength to promote a positive outcome for society, right? So giving them an opportunity to come up with ideas and in their own, at their own developmentally appropriate level, offer the opportunity, for example, to plant, garden, grow, observe what's going on in the natural environment, and really be part of seeing that they can make positive change. I think those, again, for the elementary and preschool level, that's really where you want to put your energy.
I am so grateful for that particular set of examples and for the resource that you identified, because as I'm thinking about how we create stories or story worlds around this topic, this notion of safety and well-being manifests itself in a lot of different types of activities that children can be engaged in that help them understand the natural world in ways that are appropriate for their age and stage of development. Have you seen any particular, materials or experiences or activities that already lend themselves to this kind of thinking that you just described, that are resources, whether they be in the form of storybooks or activities that families can do with their children?
So, yes, I think it's first very much everyone's knowledge that children learn about the world, right, through stories and story worlds, and increasingly through media and digital media and interactive spaces. So they're really powerful vehicles to share information and to create even norms, right? And establish or educate kids and families about norms and what you want to promote as attitudes and things like that. So, we found in our family that there are some increased representations of Black voices in children's media. Families can gather to share and watch these stories. I don't know if I want to name all of them now, but certainly lots of whether through the bookstores and or through the streaming platforms, many of them are noting diversity as one of the sort of categories so one could search under that. And I think that those stories are amazing, and we sit and watch them together intentionally, right? What I do find is that there are limited stories related to kids tackling climate impacts. We were thinking last night about when we were younger, there was the Captain Planet, which was from the 1990s. And, I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
So it's kind of like at this point a question in my mind about where the modern stories like Captain Planet and that can continue to demonstrate or show some of the diversity in the youth who engage in this topic, but to really try to continue to use the digital media and stories that are sort of in book form and other to tell, to educate and to engage our young people. I know, there's certain books that are around healthy eating, decreasing waste that I've seen. We've seen books with female protagonists who are leading the charge in recycling and reusing. So I think there are some out there, but I think there's definitely room for development. And I think Black families want to see and may benefit from seeing other families that are engaging at different generations, engaging with each other, but also connecting with their community. It's really important because Black children, families, and communities historically have been very resilient, like in the face of social stressors. And this one isn't that different. And so when we're thinking about stories, the village has to be part of it. And my favorite shows to watch now have the village all over it, whether it's animated or other forms. Yeah.
No, those are some very, very important things to keep in mind. You're also helping me to think about another aspect of development that deals with identity. And, it's sort of like the saying that if you see it, you can be it. If you see yourself represented in various kinds of experiences, whether it deals with nature or whether it deals with caring for the earth, and there's this whole thing of if you learn to care for the earth and see why it's important in your day-to-day life, it makes it a lot easier when it comes to the point when you're going to have to try to do some things to heal the earth, which is a much more difficult thing to do. But this whole notion of children having a sense of control over their environment is another thing I was hearing in terms of how, portrayals or books or illustrations can be helpful. So what would you say authors and illustrators and publishers need to know before creating stories that incorporate Black voices? You talked a little bit about the development of the children themselves. They need to be aware of that. But are there any other things that speak to the climate-related needs to families and Black children that you would like to encourage others to take into consideration that deal with issues of identity and development?
I think that overall messaging to Black families really needs to focus on hope, resilience. Black and brown children come from families that are very diverse, multidimensional. So, a story might need to consider the different impact of climate-related extreme weather on different Black communities in coastal areas, urban areas, in terms of various social economic backgrounds, so, to really represent the diversity that is in the Black community. And that's going to be really important. I think remembering that mastery is key. Because from a mental health perspective, I think the more common immediate effects of the weather-related events or just the big issue of climate change can lead to anxiety. And in our field, treatment for anxiety really starts with like how to cope, how to help yourself feel calmer and more grounded, and then being able to tackle those challenges. So I think from a mental health perspective, if story makers or authors and all are going to try to incorporate some of the mental health impact, I think really helping to establish that coping skills are a critical part of managing anxiety about everything. And then from there, you're able to begin to sort of problem solve. Additionally, trying to prevent anxiety through, proactive action to help in your world in the way that you can, right? Like not everybody can make our governments cooperate, right? But each individual really needs to feel like they can do something on their own that they can control. That's a really key part of managing anxiety and stress is what can I control and what can I do to help myself feel like I'm part of a conversation that is really important to me and my community.
Right. So maybe one of the things that we can turn to really, really quickly is that what's a burning question for you? What's the thing you'd most like to talk about with other individuals, either within your profession or who are working to increase and improve Black representation in children's media? Is there a burning question that just you'd like to be able to just sort of explore if you had lots of time to do that?
I would like to consider what's going to be our paradigm sort of in the developmental worlds for the way to stage and teach and educate and inform and act related to climate change for children as they go through various stages in development. How will we advise, the world, including teachers and those who, again, will be authoring stories about what's right for the pre-K. What are the fundamental lessons? What are the fundamental lessons for, the first to third graders? What are the lessons? And then how do we get those lessons out and circulated to the community in a way that it can be a regular part of conversation, because it needs to be at this point just more commonly discussed, more clear, and people shouldn't be overwhelmed by trying to say to their 4-year-old, oh my goodness, the ice caps are melting. Like that doesn't help anybody, right? So how can we guide our society as experts in children's development and in mental health to appropriately stage the communications and education for different levels that leads to an empowered, resilient youth who can then help to make decisions as they get older that are informed by that foundational knowledge?
Well, I think that's definitely a call to action to those who are interested in authoring children's stories or experiences for children, to keep those kinds of things in mind. And I wanted to ask about any other individuals or groups or resources. You mentioned one that I thought was really important from the American Psychiatric Association. But if there are people or organizations contributing to this environmental or climate solutions work, what resources would you point to that just sort of come to mind? And maybe you would expand a little bit more on the American Psychiatric Association's document, because I thought that was really a helpful one that we don't usually hear about.
Yes. So what's been very positive in the national organizations for psychology and psychiatry, is that there has been increased emphasis on mental health, climate-related challenges as it pertains to our patients in our communities, and frankly, some of our practitioners, right? We have practitioners where the wildfires are burning all around them, and they see it face to face, face in their lives in a way that they have to kind of also then be able to support others. So just to say that the national organizations are paying more attention. So I think both at the American Psychological Association and American Psychiatric Association, there are resources for those who would like to get more information. There's a really great book by Dr. Frederica Pereira from the Columbia Mailman School of Public Health, called Children's Health and the Peril of Climate Change, that both documents lots of the impacts and also so much of the organization and engagement of young people on this topic. So I think that's a great resource. Also, there's the West Harlem Environmental Action organization that could be a resource for those who are looking for community organizational ideas, and also when you're creating the story, how do you incorporate, right, the village, and that incorporating what these organizations might be doing as part of the story, and lastly, the Environmental Protection Agency seems to have a lot of data on disparities as it pertains to Black and minoritized communities, as it pertains to climate change. So I would recommend that as well.
Those are excellent, and we will definitely be including those in our resources that will be on the website, and that will also be a follow-up to the podcast that we did with you today. And I think that one of the other things that I was thinking about, and this is just my own background knowledge, is that helping children to understand very concrete things that can contribute to their personal well-being and health, as well as the ways in which we treat our environment, have to do with not wasting food. And I know you live in a household where there happens to be an author who has created such a resource that you all have collaborated on. Would you share a little bit about that particular resource? Because I think it also ties into what we're trying to do here in helping people understand the bigger picture.
Yes. So my husband, Vernon Gibbs II, he authored a book with his cousin, Stephen Gray, called When Good Fruit Goes Bad. And it is a beautiful story that really focuses on how to not waste food, and how to also build good self-confidence. So it sort of has a very environmentally friendly message, as well as an emotionally sort of therapeutic message. And I think it's a great example of stories that help kids say, wait a minute, if I do this thing, I could be doing something very good, very healthy, but also as I get older, I might learn that this is good for the environment. But for now, I'm just learning that it's best not to waste food, right? And so just to say that is a great example. Thank you for bringing that here. I think story makers can continue to make sure also that the representation in the books or in the stories are diverse, as is in this as it is in When Good Fruit Goes Bad. Vernon has been reading the book to schools, daycares, all across the region, so where we are in the Northeast. And so I think making sure that those voices get represented in child-friendly spaces is critical. And he's been really working on that. And I think as a whole, I think that's another way that we have to make sure the message gets out.
Very, very good. Well, I think what you've provided us is a well-rounded way to look at, behavioral and mental health and well-being, and you've provided us with some essential information and perspectives to think about as we build these areas of STEM-related knowledge into children's climate change literature and hands-on experiences, including the resource you provided around When Good Fruit Goes Bad, which is one of my favorites. I love that book. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. And as a member of our advisory board at our project dealing with this topic, we're very, very fortunate to have you as one of our advisors and one of the people to help inform us around the whole issue of family, mental health, social determinants of well-being, and we just can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Roots of Representation. If you'd like to comment on this episode, please head over to blackrepforkids.knowledge.org. Our website also contains free resources and more information about the project. which is led by Knology in collaboration with the Highlights Foundation, the National Black Child Development Institute, the Association of Children's Museums, and a panel of nationally recognized advisors. Remember, Black Rep for Kids isn't just a podcast. It's an essential part of the project's culminating experience, which will be a 2-day unconference event held in fall 2024. Head over to the website to register now. And in the meantime, let's keep the conversation going. You can also share your ideas and resources for amplifying Black voices and stories in children's STEM literature at blackrepforkids.knology.org. Roots of Representation is produced by ABF Creative, an award-winning podcast network that creates cultural and emotional connections through podcasts. The series is funded by the National Science Foundation's Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program under grant number 231-4101. Any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this podcast series are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. Roots of Representation, the podcast centering Black climate story worlds for young minds.